this essential collaboration has made this possible happen. Members of the scientific fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset I owe to congratulate the biotechnology team, Rajesh and his team, for the manner in which they have come out with this launch with a very passionate pursuit. And for them it's a launch. As Poonam said, it will happen after a few months, they're in the market. So the launch means different things to different people. So the scientific fraternity, of course, is an occasion to celebrate. I must also acknowledge the presence of Manisha over here, because in spite of her not being able to be here, she kept her commitment to join us. Kiran was also looking forward to join us. Kiran here from Chandigarh, somehow couldn't make it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when I was listening to all of you, what was occurring to my mind is that as a practitioner of medicine over the last several decades, I belong to a generation which has been witness to the transition of different spectra of diseases in this country, and also different phases in the understanding and practice of both clinical medicine as well as the investigative medicine. And when we began at the time of independence, we were mostly abreast with communicable disease. Most of the morbidity and mortality that we talk of now in the context of malignancies, etc., the metabolic disorders, accounted for because of tuberculosis, cholera, gastroenteritis, because we didn't have antimicrobials. The first antibiotic called penicillin came somewhere toward the end of 1940s. It was hailed as the queen of drugs. And then the first line of antitubercular drugs, streptomycin and others, came somewhere in the early 1950s, around 53 or so. And before that, we just had a sanitoria treatment. So either you survived or you succumbed. And there was a non-pharmacological support available. And gradually then, in somewhere in the 1980s, we overcame that and got into an era of non-communicable disease, which also includes the one that we are discussing this morning, whether it was the metabolic disorders, type 2 diabetes mellitus, cardiovascular disease, dyslipidemia, hypertension, malignancy. And somebody also in a lighter vein said that now we are adopting diseases of the civilization, or diseases which mainly affected the Western world, the most developed, possibly India was now developing. But on the serious note, we had actually conquered infections and got into this. And for example, when I joined the medical school, the dictum was, if you read syphilis, you read medicine. So syphilis was a notorious sexually transmitted disease, and it went on in the absence of a suitable antibiotic available. It went on for 20 years, and it could actually teach you entire medicine. It began from a chancre locally, then the secondary stage it would affect the skin, tertiary it would affect your nervous system, neurosyphilis, cardiovascular syphilis, and so therefore you had to actually go through the entire textbook. By the time I came out and became a postgraduate resident and actually began to teach after having become a teacher of medicine, syphilis was hardly taught in the classrooms. So that's what I'm saying, what I mean, what I say, the transition that has happened during our lifetime. And then the dictum was, if you read diabetes, you read medicine. Because it starts from very innocuous symptoms like a lot of urination, etc., and then goes on to capture our heart, kidney, nerves, everything. And that dictum holds. The viruses and the microbes had been by and large being captured. Only twice the world came across some kind of a hiccup. First we had the HIV in 1980s, we got over it, and then now the more recent deadly virus in the form of corona. But what is lesser talked about, at least in the clinical circle, is that these subtle smoldering viruses were always there, which also includes the one against which you are producing this vaccine. But one reason why we didn't capture our attention was that this change of spectrum of disease in the Indian subcontinent is also an outcome of multifactorial aspects. It's a multifactorial outcome. Maybe there's change of lifestyle happening, change of our diet patterns, the environmental factors, the stress factors, and most of all, which we often don't discuss, is the lengthening of the lifespan. At the time of independence, the average age of an Indian was hardly 50 or 55. Many of us superannuated without receiving a farewell party. Now you are 65, 70 and longer. So obviously, some of those diseases which had to affect you at the later decades of life didn't happen because you didn't live long enough. Like for example, the carcinoma of the prostate. It won't happen if you don't live beyond 50. So these are several other factors which have actually led us into this kind of a new era. And these smoldering viruses, of course we are talking in the context of the cervical cancer, but actually it's not something new to the world of medicine. As much as about quarter of a century ago, we came across a hypothesis called inflammatory hypothesis in cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, which took everybody back because earlier you thought it was just atherosclerosis happening, or somebody was saying no, it's inflammatory. And then you also started linking dental caries to heart attack. If you had a bad tooth, it could contribute to heart attack. So it's not something new that we are discussing. It's been there. Hepatitis C leading on or predisposing to the cancers of liver. But what has happened is now, and why we are here discussing is, that COVID has awakened us to the virtues of preventive health care. So the discussion, ladies and gentlemen, what we are discussing was happening earlier also, on the professionals. But it was not in public domain, it was not public concern, it was not part of the public awakening. So as the adage goes, every virtue is accompanied, every adversity is accompanied by a virtue. I think one of the good things that COVID has done to us is there is raised huge amount of awareness about preventive health care, particularly in a society like India where preventive health care was never talked about. And there was again multiple factors for that, our socio-economic factors being the foremost, because then in a society which is hardly in a position to afford a reasonable therapeutic treatment, you can't expect them to go in for preventive medicine because that's a luxury of the next day. And in my practice, I had almost 95% of my patients have been diabetics. I know of so many of them who would make a calendar and skip the drug for 2 days in a week so that they could feed their family. And some of my junior residents would, scold them and say, "Agar dawaii nahi khani thi to dikhane kyun aaye?" And then I would call them separately, boy, and I tell them, you don't understand the sensitivity of a common Indian. His self-respect outweighs him, he can't confess why he did so. So thanks to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, schemes like Ayushman Bharat have put us in an enabling position to also think of indulging in the luxury of preventive medicine. So that is the, ladies and gentlemen, the difference which has happened in the last 7-8 years. We can now afford to also look for preventive health care. And as far as the Department of Biotechnology is concerned, I must compliment that they have been consistently in the lead, and Rajesh and his team, and they are in the collaborative mood. I agree with Mr. Poonawala that we can't go ahead without an integrated approach. In the Department of Biotechnology, there are a number of programs formalized, like the Indo-US Vaccine Program, National Biopharma Mission, Mission COVID Suraksha, which was launched at the behest of Prime Minister Modi. I am saying so all this because unless I pat my back, who else would? So I had to pat it. That's why I did hesitate in saying that this is indeed the launching. And of course, the world's first DNA live vaccine. And why this program happening today, as Rajesh was hinting at, but felt shy of saying it in too many words. In fact, it is true, and I have no hesitation to confess. I insisted that you must have a program like this. Because they did all the trials for the DNA vaccine in that institute in Faridabad. But none in the country knows where is Faridabad, where the trial happened. So I told him you have to start making noise from the beginning itself. They didn't make enough noise. Of course, when it goes into the market, those have market stakes cannot be grudged for making noise because it's a selfie project. So the scientific effort sometimes does not receive the kind of recognition, the scale of recognition. It's like what happens in the field to which Manisha Koirala belongs. Once a movie becomes hit, you talk of the hero and heroine. Nobody bothers to ask who wrote the script. But the script writer, ladies and gentlemen, Rajesh and his